The blood on her torn dress was the first thing Vincent Sawyer noticed when he rounded the bend in the mountain trail, his breath catching in his throat at the sight of the woman crumpled in the dirt like a discarded rag doll. The sun hung low over the Wyoming Territory mountains in the summer of 1876, casting long shadows across the rocky path that led to his remote cabin. Vincent had been checking his trap lines, the leather satchel slung over his broad shoulder heavy with pelts and supplies from his monthly trip into town. He dropped everything and ran to her side, his muscular frame moving with surprising speed for a man of his size. She was barely breathing, her face pale beneath a layer of dust and dried blood. Vincent knelt beside her, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he checked for injuries. Her dark hair was matted with blood from a wound on her scalp, and her dress, once fine fabric meant for civilized society, was torn and stained. She wore no jewelry, carried no bag, and her shoes were practically destroyed from what must have been miles of desperate walking. Vincent's keen eyes, accustomed to reading signs in the wilderness, took in the scene quickly. No horse tracks nearby, no wagon ruts. She had been on foot, alone, and running from something or someone. "Miss." His deep voice was barely above a whisper as he touched her shoulder. "Miss, can you hear me?" No response. Vincent pressed 2 fingers to her throat, relieved to feel a pulse, though it was weak and thready. He glanced up at the sky, calculating the time, getting dark soon, and the temperature would drop fast in these mountains. His cabin was a good 2 miles back, but there was no choice. He could not leave her here to die. Vincent scooped her up as though she weighed nothing more than a sack of flour, cradling her against his chest. She was too thin, he noticed, her bones pressing through the fabric of her dress. His long brown hair, tied back with a strip of leather, fell forward over his shoulder as he adjusted his grip. Standing well over 6 feet tall with shoulders broad from years of chopping wood, hauling water, and surviving in the harsh wilderness, Vincent had the strength to carry her the distance, but he still moved as quickly as he dared. Every stumble could worsen her injuries, every jostle might cause more harm. The walk back to his cabin felt endless. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Vincent's arms never wavered, his powerful legs eating up the miles with steady determination. By the time his small log cabin came into view, tucked into a clearing with smoke still rising lazily from the chimney where he had banked the fire that morning, full darkness had fallen. Only the light of a rising moon guided his final steps. Inside, Vincent kicked the door shut with his boot and carried the woman straight to his bed, the only real piece of furniture in the single-room cabin besides a rough-hewn table and 2 chairs. He laid her down carefully on the patchwork quilt his mother had made years ago, before she passed. The cabin was sparse but clean, everything in its place as was Vincent's habit. Shelves lined one wall, holding supplies and his few possessions. A stone fireplace dominated another wall, and a small window looked out over the valley below. Vincent built up the fire first, coaxing flames from the embers until heat filled the cabin. Then he lit 2 oil lamps, bringing light to assess his patient properly. In the better light, he could see she was perhaps 22 or 23 years old, with delicate features that spoke of a gentle upbringing far removed from the harsh realities of frontier life. The wound on her head was nasty, but had stopped bleeding, though dried blood crusted her hairline. Her hands bore fresh scratches and cuts, defensive wounds perhaps, or simply from fighting through brush and branches in her flight. He heated water in his largest pot, preparing to clean her wounds. Vincent had learned basic medicine from necessity, living alone in the mountains where the nearest doctor was 3 days' ride away in Cheyenne. He had set his own broken bones, stitched his own cuts, and nursed himself through fever and illness. But tending to a woman, to someone so fragile and vulnerable, that was different. His hands shook slightly as he wrung out a cloth in the warm water. Starting with her face, Vincent gently cleaned away the dirt and blood, revealing smooth skin beneath. Her breathing remained shallow but steady. When he moved to examine her head wound, he had to work carefully, his thick fingers surprisingly deft as they parted her hair. The gash was about 2 inches long, no longer bleeding but deep enough to scar. He cleaned it thoroughly with whiskey, the sharp scent filling the cabin, then bandaged it with strips of clean cloth. Her dress was ruined, torn beyond repair and filthy. Vincent hesitated, propriety warring with practicality, but she needed to be cleaned and checked for other injuries. With his jaw set, he carefully removed the tattered garment, keeping his eyes averted as much as possible, focusing only on what was necessary. Bruises colored her ribs, dark purple and yellow, days old perhaps. More scratches covered her arms and legs. But no broken bones that he could feel, no other wounds that threatened her life. He washed her as clinically as he could manage, then dressed her in one of his shirts, the soft flannel engulfing her small frame. It fell to her knees like a nightgown. Vincent covered her with every blanket he owned, trying to warm her body which felt too cold to his touch. Then he sat back in his chair, pulled close to the bedside, and began his vigil. The first night was the worst. Her fever spiked just after midnight, her skin burning hot beneath his palm when he checked her forehead. Vincent worked through the night, changing cool cloths on her brow, forcing drops of water between her cracked lips, monitoring her breathing. She thrashed sometimes, crying out in her delirium, words too jumbled to understand but the fear in them clear. Each time Vincent would take her hand, his large palm engulfing her small fingers, and speak in low, soothing tones. "You are safe now," he murmured. "Nothing is going to hurt you here." By dawn, he was exhausted, his eyes gritty with lack of sleep, but her fever had broken. Vincent allowed himself to doze in the chair, jerking awake every few minutes to check on her, unable to fully rest while she remained unconscious. The second day passed much like the first. Vincent tended to his most essential chores, feeding his 2 horses in the small stable behind the cabin, bringing in water from the creek, keeping the fire going. But he never strayed far, always returning to check on the woman in his bed. He managed to get more water into her, supporting her head and letting drops fall on her tongue. She swallowed reflexively, a good sign. On the 3rd day, her eyes finally fluttered open. Vincent happened to be right there, having just changed her bandage, and he found himself staring into eyes the color of sage in summer, gray, green, and beautiful despite the confusion clouding them. "Where?" Her voice was barely a rasp, her throat dry from days without speaking. "You are safe," Vincent said immediately, reaching for the cup of water he kept ready. "Here, drink slowly." He helped her sit up just enough to sip, his arm supporting her shoulders. She drank greedily and he had to pull the cup away. "Not too much at once. Your stomach needs to adjust." She looked around the cabin, taking in her surroundings, then down at herself in his oversized shirt. Her eyes widened, darting back to him with a mixture of fear and questions. Vincent held up both hands, backing away slightly. "I found you on the trail 3 days ago, collapsed and bleeding. I brought you here to my cabin, tended your wounds. I had to clean you up and change your clothes, but I was respectful, I swear it. You needed help, and there was no one else." She stared at him, seeming to assess the truth of his words in his face. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because some of the tension left her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered. "What is your name?" Vincent asked gently. "What happened to you, Eliza?" she said after a moment. "Eliza Garrison." "I was traveling with a wagon train heading west to California with my aunt and uncle. We were attacked 3 days ago, I think, maybe 4. I ran. I just ran and did not look back." Her voice broke, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I do not know if anyone else survived." "There were gunshots, screaming. The bandits wanted our supplies, our horses. My uncle told me to run, so I ran." Vincent's jaw tightened. Bandit attacks on wagon trains were not uncommon, though usually such things happened farther south, along more traveled routes. "Where did this happen?" "How far did you run?" "I do not know," Eliza said, her voice small. "I ran until I could not run any more, then I walked. I was trying to find help, find someone, anyone. I remember climbing up into the mountains, thinking maybe I could see a town from higher up. Then everything went black." "You walked at least 30 miles, maybe more, given the direction you came from," Vincent said, respect in his voice. "That shows real strength, Miss Garrison. Just Eliza, please." She looked at him properly then, seeming to notice his size, his long hair, the rough frontier clothing. "You live up here alone?" "Yes, madam, Vincent Sawyer. I trap and hunt, trade pelts in town a few times a year. Not much for company, generally speaking." He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly aware of how rough he must appear to this refined young woman. "I know it is not proper, you being here alone with me, but there was no choice. Still is not really. You are too weak to travel, and it is a hard 3-day ride to the nearest town." Eliza nodded slowly. "I understand, and I am grateful, truly. You saved my life." She tried to sit up further and winced, her hand going to her ribs. "Careful," Vincent said, moving forward instinctively. "You have bruised ribs, maybe cracked. You need to take it slow." "How long?" she asked. "How long until I can travel?" Vincent considered, his gaze frank. "Honestly, a few weeks at least. You are severely dehydrated, malnourished, and that head wound alone could have killed you. You need rest and food and time to heal. Pushing too soon could set you back or worse." He watched her process this information, saw the worry cross her features. "I have nowhere to go anyway," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "My aunt and uncle, they were all the family I had. If they are gone—" She could not finish the sentence. "One thing at a time," Vincent said firmly. "First we get you well, then we figure out the rest." The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Vincent would wake before dawn, as was his habit, and check on Eliza first thing. He would help her sit up, give her water, and prepare a simple breakfast. At first, she could only manage broth and weak tea, her stomach too unsettled for solid food. But gradually, he introduced soft foods, thin oatmeal, mashed beans, bread soaked in milk. She gained strength slowly, able to stay awake for longer periods, able to sit up on her own. Vincent moved about his work with Eliza as his constant charge. He brought his outdoor tasks inside when he could, sitting at his table to repair tack or sharpen knives where he could keep an eye on her. When he had to go outside, he never went far or for long. He taught her to call out if she needed him, and he would come running, which happened more than once in those first days when she needed help standing or walking the few steps necessary. By the end of the first week, Eliza could sit at the table for meals, though Vincent had to carry her there, his arms steady around her waist, his strength making the task effortless. She was acutely aware of his size during those moments, how small she felt against his broad chest, how his muscles flexed as he lifted her. There was something comforting about his strength, something that made her feel protected in a way she had never experienced before. They talked during those meals, awkward at first but gradually more comfortable. Vincent was not used to conversation, his words often halting as he searched for what to say. But Eliza had a way of drawing him out, asking questions about his life, his trapping, the mountains he called home. "I came west 5 years ago," Vincent told her one evening as they ate a supper of venison stew and cornbread. "My parents had a farm in Missouri, but when they passed, there was nothing keeping me there. I heard about opportunities in the Wyoming Territory, came up here and just kept going until I found a place that felt right. Built this cabin with my own hands, been here 3 years now." "Do you ever get lonely?" Eliza asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Vincent considered the question. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I like the quiet, the solitude. No one bothering me, no expectations, no disappointments. Out here, it is just me and the land, and that is enough. Or at least it was." He did not explain what he meant by that last part, but Eliza heard the unspoken words anyway. Having her here had changed something, shifted the balance of his carefully ordered world. "Tell me about you," Vincent said, turning the conversation. "Where did you come from? What were you going to do in California?" Eliza's expression grew sad. "I was raised in Philadelphia, in a nice house with servants and parties and all the trappings of society. My parents died 2 years ago in a fire. My father's brother, my Uncle Thomas, he took me in, but his wife never really wanted me there. When they decided to go west to start fresh, I think they saw it as an opportunity to leave me behind with some distant cousin, but I begged to come along. I wanted adventure, I think. Wanted to see the world beyond parlors and drawing rooms. I got more adventure than I bargained for." "I am sorry," Vincent said, and he meant it. "About your family, about what happened. Thank you." Eliza looked down at her hands. "I keep hoping maybe some of them made it, that maybe my aunt or uncle survived and got to a town, are looking for me, but I know that is probably just hope talking." Vincent did not contradict her, but they both knew the likelihood was slim. Bandit attacks rarely left survivors, especially if they were thorough enough that someone like Eliza had to run for her life. As the second week began, Eliza grew steadier on her feet. Vincent would walk with her, short distances at first, from the bed to the table, then from the table to the door. His hand hovered near her elbow, ready to catch her if she stumbled, but increasingly she did not need his support. Her appetite improved too, and color returned to her cheeks. The wound on her head was healing cleanly, the bruises on her ribs fading from purple to yellow. Vincent found himself watching her more than was probably proper, noticing little things. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The small smile that played at her lips when he said something she found amusing. The determined set of her jaw when she pushed herself to walk a little farther each day. She was beautiful, he realized, but more than that, she was strong. Not in the physical way he understood strength, but in spirit, in her will to survive and recover. Eliza, for her part, found herself equally aware of Vincent. She had never known a man like him, so completely self-sufficient and capable. He could cook and clean as well as any woman she had known, but he could also hunt and track and survive in wilderness that would kill most men. His hands, so large and rough, were incredibly gentle when he changed her bandages or helped her walk. And there was something about the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention, that made her heart beat faster. "Why did you never marry?" she asked him one afternoon. They were sitting outside the cabin, Eliza bundled in blankets in the chair Vincent had carried out for her. The weather was fine, the summer sun warm on their faces. "A man like you, surely women would." She trailed off, suddenly embarrassed by her boldness. But Vincent just chuckled, a rare sound that transformed his usually serious face. "Not many women come through these parts, and the ones who do are usually already spoken for. Besides, what would I offer a wife? This rough life, this isolation, it would not be fair." "Some women might appreciate it," Eliza said softly. "Some women might see the peace in it, the beauty, Not everyone wants ballrooms in society. Their eyes met and something passed between them, unspoken but profound. Vincent looked away first, his jaw tight. Maybe so. The days continued to pass, blending into each other in a way that felt both slow and fast. Eliza's strength returned steadily. By the middle of the second week, she could walk on her own, though not far before tiring. She insisted on helping with chores, small things at first, folding clothes, preparing vegetables for meals, sweeping the cabin floor. Vincent protested, saying she should rest, but Eliza was adamant. "I need to feel useful," she told him. "I cannot just lie around being waited on. Please, let me help." So he relented, and the cabin became a shared space in a way it never had been before. They worked side by side, falling into an easy companionship. Eliza would prepare ingredients while Vincent cooked. She would wash dishes while he dried and put them away. Simple tasks, domestic and mundane, but somehow intimate in their ordinariness. They talked more as the days passed, sharing stories of their lives. Vincent told her about trapping, about reading weather in the clouds, about tracking animals through the forest. Eliza spoke of her childhood, of books she had read, music she had heard, places she had dreamed of seeing. They came from such different worlds, but somehow, up here in the mountains, those differences seemed to matter less. "You know how to read?" Eliza asked one evening. She had noticed a small shelf of books tucked in the corner, well-worn volumes that looked frequently handled. "My mother taught me," Vincent said. "She was a school teacher before she married my father. She insisted I learn properly. Those were her books, the ones I kept after she passed." Eliza walked over to examine them, running her fingers along the spines. Poetry, philosophy, even a play or two. "Would you like me to read to you?" she offered. "In the evenings after supper. It might be nice." Vincent agreed, and so began a new ritual. After they cleaned up from the evening meal, they would sit by the fire, Eliza in the chair with a book, Vincent on the floor with his back against the stone hearth, working on some project or simply listening. Her voice filled the cabin, bringing stories to life, and Vincent found himself entranced not just by the words but by the sound of her speaking them, the animation in her face, the way she would glance at him to see his reaction. Those evenings were Vincent's favorite time of day, though he would not admit it aloud. There was something peaceful about them, something that felt like home in a way his cabin never had before, even after 3 years. He started to dread the day when Eliza would be well enough to leave, when this strange, unexpected interlude would end and he would be alone again. Eliza felt it too, that sense of time slipping away. She was getting better, undeniably so. Her head wound had healed to a thin pink line. Her ribs no longer ached with every breath. Her hands had lost their scratches and cuts. She could walk without tiring now, could help with more substantial chores. Soon, there would be no reason for her to stay, no excuse to extend her time in this place. The thought filled her with an unexpected sadness. She should want to leave, should want to return to civilization, to find out what happened to her aunt and uncle, to plan for her future. But the truth was, she had never felt more at peace than she did here, in this simple cabin with this quiet, complicated man. Philadelphia society, with all its rules and expectations, felt like a lifetime ago, like something that had happened to a different person. "Vincent," she said one night, putting down the book she had been reading. They were well into the 3rd week now, 20 days since he had found her collapsed on his trail. "I have been thinking, when I am well enough to travel, what will I do? Where will I go? I have no family, no money, no prospects. I could go to California as originally planned, but to what end? I do not know anyone there." Vincent had been whittling, carving a small figure from a piece of wood, but he stopped, his hands stilling. "I have been thinking about that too," he admitted. "There is a town called Wickenburg down in the Arizona Territory. I hear it is growing, needs people. Or you could go to Cheyenne, find work there maybe. You are educated, could teach perhaps, or work in a shop." "Is that what you think I should do?" Eliza asked, her heart beating fast. "Go to a town, find work, start over." Vincent set down his whittling, looking up at her with those intense dark eyes. "I think," he said carefully, "that you should do whatever makes you happy. You have been through hell and survived it. You deserve a life that brings you joy." "What if joy is not in a town?" Eliza said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if it is here in these mountains, in this cabin?" The air between them suddenly felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. Vincent stood slowly, his movements deliberate. He was so tall, Eliza had to tilt her head back to look at him. "Eliza," he said, his voice rough, "you have to understand what you would be choosing. This life, it is hard. Winters up here are brutal, sometimes snowed in for months. The nearest neighbor is a day's ride away. You would be giving up everything you knew, everything you were raised for." "I know," Eliza said, standing too, though she still barely reached his shoulder. "I know all that, but I also know that I have never felt more myself than I have these past 3 weeks. I have never felt more alive, more needed, more at home. When I think about leaving, about never seeing you again, it feels wrong. It feels like I would be walking away from something important, something real." Vincent's hand came up, his rough palm cupping her cheek with infinite gentleness. "You are sure?" he asked. "Because if you stay, Eliza, if you choose this, I need you to be sure. I am not a man of fancy words or grand gestures, but what I feel for you, it is real and it is deep. These 3 weeks having you here, it has changed everything. I cannot imagine this place without you now." "I am sure," Eliza said, her own hand coming up to cover his where it rested against her face. "I want to stay, Vincent. If you will have me, I want to stay." He kissed her then, a kiss that was gentle and fierce all at once, full of the emotion that neither of them had been willing to voice until now. Eliza melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, his around her waist, lifting her off her feet. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads resting together. "I will have you," Vincent said, his voice thick with emotion. "God help me, I will have you and keep you and protect you for as long as you will let me." "Forever then," Eliza whispered. "Forever sounds about right." They married a week later, as soon as Eliza was strong enough for the 3-day journey to Cheyenne. Vincent would not have her stay as his wife without the blessing of church and law. His sense of honor too strong to compromise, even though Eliza told him she did not care about such formalities. They rode together, Eliza on a gentle mare that Vincent had been saving for trade, Vincent on his large roan stallion. They packed light, planning to buy what they needed in town. Cheyenne was larger than Eliza expected, a real city growing up in the Wyoming Territory, fueled by the railroad and the cattle trade. People filled the streets, a mix of cowboys, miners, railroad workers, and respectable citizens trying to bring civilization to the frontier. Vincent, uncomfortable in the crowds, kept close to Eliza, his hand on her back, guiding her through the chaos. They found a preacher at a small church on the edge of town, a kindly older man who asked no questions when Vincent explained they wanted to be married quickly. "Young love," the preacher said with a smile. "I remember what that was like. Do you have witnesses?" Vincent recruited 2 men from the street, offering them each $1 for their trouble, and the ceremony was performed right there in the church, simple and quick. Eliza wore a new dress Vincent had insisted on buying, a pretty blue calico that brought out her eyes. Vincent cleaned up as best he could, trimming his beard, tying his long hair back neatly. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed Eliza with a tenderness that made her eyes sting with tears. They spent one night in a hotel, a luxury that felt strange after weeks in the cabin. The room was small but clean, and for the first time they came together as husband and wife properly, their union gentle and full of the love that had grown between them. Eliza had been nervous, her experience in such matters limited to vague warnings from her aunt about wifely duties. But Vincent was patient and tender, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Eliza knew she had made the right choice. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I know it has only been a few weeks, and perhaps I should not feel so much so quickly, but I do. I love you, Vincent." "I love you too," Vincent replied, his arms tightening around her. "From the moment I saw you on that trail, something in me knew. I did not understand it then, but I do now. You were meant to find your way to me." They returned to the cabin as a married couple, and life took on a new rhythm. Eliza threw herself into making the cabin a true home. She used the small amount of money Vincent had saved from his trapping to buy fabric and supplies in Cheyenne. And over the following weeks, she sewed curtains for the window, made cushions for the chairs, created small touches of domesticity that transformed the rough space. Vincent added to the cabin too, building a separate bedroom so the main room could be more of a living space, constructing shelves for Eliza's growing collection of books, crafting furniture with his skilled hands. As summer turned to autumn, they prepared for winter. Vincent taught Eliza everything she needed to know about survival in the mountains: how to preserve meat, how to store vegetables, how to recognize the signs of coming weather. Eliza learned quickly, her quick mind grasping concepts that Vincent explained with patient thoroughness. They worked side by side, cutting wood for the winter, hunting and smoking meat, gathering nuts and berries from the forest. The first snow came in late October, a light dusting that melted by noon. But it was a warning of what was to come. Vincent took Eliza down the mountain, one last time before the heavy snows would make travel impossible. Wanting to stock up on flour and coffee and other necessities they could not produce themselves. In the town of Wickenburg, which they visited this time for its closer proximity and better prices, they ran into a surprise. Walking down the main street, arms laden with packages, Eliza heard someone call her name. "Eliza, Eliza Garrison." She turned, hardly daring to believe her ears, and saw a woman hurrying toward her. It took a moment to recognize her, but then Eliza's heart leaped. Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Patterson had been on the wagon train, a widow heading west with her 2 children. She reached Eliza and pulled her into a tight embrace. "Oh, my dear, we thought you were dead. We looked for you after the attack, but there was no trace. What happened? Where have you been?" The story came out in a rush, interrupted by exclamations and tears. Mrs. Patterson explained that several families from the wagon train had survived the attack, fighting off the bandits after the initial shock. But in the chaos, several people had gone missing, including Eliza and her aunt and uncle. "Your Uncle Thomas, he was killed in the first wave," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "I am so sorry, but your Aunt Martha, she survived. She is here in Wickenburg living with the Johnsons. She has been mourning you something terrible." Eliza felt tears stream down her face, relief and grief mixing together. "Take me to her, please." Vincent came with them, silent but supportive, his presence a comfort. They found Martha Johnson, née Garrison, in a small house on the edge of town. She was hanging laundry when they arrived, and the sight of Eliza made her drop the sheet she was holding. "Eliza," she whispered, as though afraid to believe her eyes. "Aunt Martha," Eliza cried, running to her. They embraced, both women sobbing, words spilling out too fast to understand. Finally, they separated enough to look at each other, and Martha's eyes went to Vincent, who stood at a respectful distance. "This is Vincent Sawyer," Eliza said, taking his hand and pulling him forward. "My husband. He found me after the attack, nursed me back to health, saved my life. We were married in Cheyenne a few months ago." Martha looked between them, seeing the way they stood together, the love evident in their faces. "Then I owe you a debt I can never repay," she said to Vincent. "You brought her back to me." "She brought herself," Vincent said quietly. "I just helped." They spent the afternoon together, filling in the gaps of the past months. Martha explained that she had been injured in the attack but recovered. She was living with the Johnsons, family friends from Philadelphia who had also been on the wagon train. She had written letters back east, trying to settle Thomas's affairs, trying to find out if Eliza had somehow made it to another town. She had been planning to head back to Philadelphia in the spring. "But now you are here," Martha said, squeezing Eliza's hand. "And married. Tell me everything." Eliza did, explaining about Vincent's cabin, about the 3 weeks of recovery, about falling in love. She watched her aunt's face, worried about judgment, but Martha only smiled. "Your mother would be happy," she said finally. "She always said you had an independent spirit. She would approve of you finding your own path, even if it is not the one anyone expected." They made plans to visit regularly, Wickenburg being close enough for trips during the warmer months. Martha wanted to meet Eliza's new life, to see the cabin and understand her niece's choice. Vincent promised to bring Eliza down before the heavy snows, and they parted with embraces and tears, but good ones this time. Winter came in full force in November, the snows deep and constant. Vincent and Eliza settled into their hibernation, the cabin warm and cozy even as the world outside turned white and cold. They passed the long dark evenings reading, talking, making love, learning each other in the way newlyweds do. Eliza discovered Vincent's dry sense of humor, his unexpected love of poetry, his skill at chess. Vincent learned that Eliza sang when she cooked, that she was stubborn about silly things, that she loved watching the snow fall through the window. They talked about their future during those quiet winter nights. Vincent wanted to expand his trapping operation, maybe even hire help if they could find someone trustworthy. Eliza wanted to start a small school, teaching children from the scattered homesteads and mining camps in the area. They talked about children of their own, about adding rooms to the cabin, about building a life together that was uniquely theirs. The winter was hard, as Vincent had warned. Temperatures dropped so low that ice formed on the inside of the window. Snow piled higher than the door, and Vincent had to dig a path each morning just to reach the stable. But inside, they were warm and safe and happy. Eliza never regretted her choice, not even on the coldest, darkest days. She had found where she belonged. Spring came slowly, the snow melting in patches, revealing brown earth and the first green shoots of new growth. Vincent resumed his trap lines, often taking Eliza with him now that she was strong and capable in the wilderness. She learned to track and hunt, to read signs in the forest, to move silently through the trees. They were partners in every sense of the word, working together to build their life. In May, they traveled to Wickenburg to visit Martha and to trade Vincent's winter take of pelts. The town had grown even in the few months since they had last visited, new buildings going up, more families arriving. Martha was thrilled to see them, and she and Eliza spent hours talking, catching up on months of separation. Vincent, uncomfortable with so much female conversation, excused himself to handle business matters. When he returned to the Johnson house that evening, he found Eliza glowing with excitement. "Vincent, I have news," she said, pulling him aside. "I am pregnant. I am sure of it. I have suspected for a few weeks now, and Mrs. Johnson, she has 6 children, she confirmed it for me. We are going to have a baby." Vincent's face transformed, joy lighting his usually serious features. He picked Eliza up and spun her around, careful even in his excitement. "A baby," he breathed. "Eliza, are you happy?" "Is this what you want?" "More than anything," she assured him. "I want your babies, I want our family, I want this life we are building together." They stayed in Wickenburg for a week, and Martha insisted on sending them back with supplies and baby clothes she had saved from when her own children were small. Vincent was attentive to the point of being overprotective, worrying about Eliza riding, about her lifting things, about every little detail. Eliza found it both endearing and exasperating. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him more than once. But she appreciated his care, his concern, the way he made sure she was comfortable and safe. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and fall. Eliza bloomed, her body changing, growing round with their child. Vincent added yet another room to the cabin, this one specifically for the baby, and spent his evenings carving a cradle, sanding each piece until it was smooth as silk. They made preparations, washing and folding tiny clothes, stocking supplies, trying to anticipate every need. In December, as winter once again gripped the mountains, Eliza went into labor. Vincent had arranged for a midwife, Mrs. Patterson from the wagon train, who now lived in a homestead half a day's ride away, to come stay with them for the last month of Eliza's pregnancy. She was there when the contractions started, guiding Eliza through the long hours, offering encouragement and expertise. Vincent paced outside for most of it, too nervous to be still, too worried to focus on anything else. When he finally heard a baby's cry pierce the air, he nearly broke down the door in his haste to get inside. Eliza lay in their bed, exhausted but beaming, a tiny bundle in her arms. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Vincent approached almost reverently, looking down at the tiny red-faced infant. "A son," he whispered. "We have a son." "I was thinking we could name him Victor," Eliza said. "Victor Thomas Sawyer, after you and my uncle." "Victor," Vincent repeated, reaching out one large finger to touch the baby's tiny hand. Victor's fingers closed around his father's finger instinctively, and Vincent felt something shift in his chest, a love so overwhelming it nearly brought him to his knees. "Hello, Victor. I am your papa." Life with a baby was chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. Vincent proved to be a devoted father, patient with crying and night feedings, always ready to help. He would walk the floor with Victor when the baby was fussy, his deep voice humming lullabies his own mother had sung. Eliza watched them together and felt her heart might burst with love. The years passed, each one building on the last. When Victor was 2, they had another child, a daughter they named Emily. Then, 2 years after that, another son, Samuel. The cabin grew with their family, Vincent continually adding rooms and improvements. They built a real barn, acquired more livestock, expanded the garden. What had started as a rough cabin became a proper homestead. Vincent's trapping business thrived, particularly after he partnered with a few other mountain men in the area, pooling resources and knowledge. Eliza started her school, teaching not just her own children but the handful of other children from nearby homesteads and camps. It was small, nothing like the grand schools of Philadelphia, but it was hers and she loved it. They visited Martha regularly, and she visited them, doting on her great-nieces and nephew. She eventually remarried, a good man named Frank who had lost his own wife, and they built a happy life together in Wickenburg. The connection to her aunt gave Eliza a sense of continuity, a bridge between her old life and her new one. The children grew up wild and free in the mountains, as comfortable in the wilderness as they were with books and learning. Victor was serious like his father, with the same intense focus and determination. Emily was bright and curious, always asking questions, always exploring. Samuel was the charmer, quick to laugh and always into mischief. Vincent and Eliza raised them with love and discipline, teaching them to be independent, to be kind, to value hard work and honesty. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent surprised Eliza by taking her back to the spot where he had found her all those years ago. They rode up together, the trail so familiar now, but still capable of taking Eliza's breath away with its beauty. When they reached the bend where she had collapsed, Vincent stopped and dismounted, helping Eliza down. 10 years ago I was walking this trail alone, Vincent said, his arm around her waist. I had no idea my whole life was about to change. Finding you here, Eliza, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Finding you saved me, Eliza replied, leaning into his solid strength. Not just physically, but in every way. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love. They stood there together, looking out over the valley below, the mountains rising all around them. It was a hard life, certainly harder than anything Eliza had been raised for. But it was theirs, built together, full of love and laughter and meaning. I would do it all again, Eliza said softly. Every moment, every hardship, every joy. It all led to this, to us, to the life we built. I would not change a single thing. Vincent kissed her then, gentle and sweet, a promise renewed. Neither would I, my love, neither would I. They rode back to the cabin as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Their children ran out to meet them, voices raised in greeting, and Vincent scooped Emily and Samuel up while Victor walked beside them, already growing tall like his father. Inside, the cabin was warm and welcoming, dinner waiting, the table set for their family. That night, after the children were asleep, Vincent and Eliza sat together by the fire as they had done countless times before. Eliza rested her head on Vincent's shoulder, his arm secure around her. They did not need words, the contentment between them speaking volumes. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges as they always do. Victor grew into a man much like his father, strong and capable and drawn to the wilderness. He eventually built his own cabin, not far from Vincent and Eliza, and brought home a wife of his own. Emily became a teacher like her mother, taking over the small school when Eliza decided to retire. Samuel left for a while, drawn by curiosity to see more of the world, but he returned after a few years, declaring nowhere felt as right as home. Vincent and Eliza grew old together, their hair turning gray, their bodies showing the wear of hard work and harsh winters. But their love never diminished, never wavered. They still took walks together, still sat by the fire in the evenings, still looked at each other with the same affection and devotion they had felt from the beginning. On their 30th anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, Vincent stood to make a toast. His voice was still strong, his frame still solid despite his years. 30 years ago, he said, I found a woman collapsed on my trail. I thought I was saving her life, but really she saved mine. Eliza, you gave me everything. You turned a cabin into a home, solitude into family, existence into life. I love you more today than I did 30 years ago, and I will love you until my last breath. Eliza stood, tears streaming down her face, and kissed him to the cheers and applause of their family. And I love you, she said, always and forever. They lived many more years, their love story becoming legend in the area. The couple who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, who had built a life and a legacy together. When visitors came to their valley, they would point out the Sawyer homestead with respect, speaking of Vincent and Eliza with admiration. In the end, they passed within days of each other, neither willing to continue without the other. They were buried on a hill overlooking their valley, their graves side by side, marked with simple stones that bore their names and the dates of their long lives. Their children and grandchildren mourned, but they also celebrated, knowing that Vincent and Eliza had lived fully, loved completely, and left behind a family that would carry on their legacy for generations. The cabin still stands, maintained by their descendants, a testament to the life they built together. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispers through the pine trees, you can almost hear them, Vincent's deep voice and Eliza's gentle laughter, echoing through the mountains they called home, a reminder that true love, once found, never really dies. It lives on in the stories we tell, the families we build, and the lives we touch. Vincent Sawyer found Eliza Garrison collapsed on his trail, nursed her back to health over 3 long weeks, and in doing so, found the other half of his soul. Their story, born of desperation and chance, became one of devotion and choice, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most ordinary ways, with one person simply choosing to help another, and both choosing to open their hearts to what comes next.